When I went into Gaza, I had been exposed to quite a bit of violent conflict, large-scale war, counterterrorism, counterinsurgency, insurgency, sectarian violence. I'd seen quite a bit. And what I saw and what I witnessed in Gaza, nothing compares to it. A young child without a family, simply seeking food, starving, who had to travel to get it, who amidst his struggle was grateful, he kissed our hand and said thank you, and then moments later was gunned down. That's something that I couldn't let that story stay there and not be heard. That voice in my head, don't forget what you've seen here, is something that I hear every day in my head when I wake up thinking about Palestine. The majority of the contractors that were hired to work on the armed security contract, the majority of them were recruited directly from the United States Infidels Motorcycle Club. The Infidels Motorcycle Club is a motorcycle club, a gang, if you will, that fashioned themselves as modern-day crusaders. They brandish themselves with giant crusader cross tattoos that say infidels on them, with 1095 written in the tattoo, which is the year that Pope Urban gave the directive to start the first crusades, to go to the Holy Land and rid the earth of the vermin Muslims. His words, not mine. So you have this organization of the Infidels Motorcycle Club who were hired to work on this security contract, who have a creed of fight global jihad and eliminate Muslims from the earth. It gave me a glimpse into a side of humanity that I didn't know existed.
Good day, everyone. We are here today with a very special guest, Anthony Aguilar. We saw Anthony on many different shows. One of them being Revolutionary Change with Jen and Peter, where we've been on as well. We've been a big fan of you, Anthony. You are showing up a lot on our feed lately with regards to your actions for Palestine, which is something that we greatly admire. But for those who don't know you in our audience, maybe you can give a bit of a short introduction: who you are, why are you suddenly showing up in our feeds, etc., etc. Please go ahead, Anthony.
Well, I served in the United States Army for 25 years, and I retired this past March, so a little less than a year ago. And shortly after I retired, I received a phone call from the armed component of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation to deliver humanitarian aid into Gaza. That call came in May. They were calling to recruit me specifically. They wanted individuals with a special operations background. So I took the job. I went to Gaza, and within the first days of operating it, I recognized very early that war crimes, violations of Geneva Convention, there were things going on that that there was more beneath the surface. It wasn't just a complete disregard of international law and violations of war crimes that were blatant. There was more going on. So I stayed on board and kind of got deep into it to try to figure out really what was at the heart of this fake humanitarian organization. And once it became clear to me that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation had been established long before October 7th, long before the second ceasefire and the blocking of UN aid, we're talking, the idea of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is a privatized effort started back in 2021. And it really gave me concern as to how the United States was involved in contracting a privatized aid entity to be in Gaza to replace UNRWA, conveniently UNRWA being blocked from going into Gaza because of alleged ties to Hamas, which were later found to be unsubstantiated. And it really gave me a lot of concern because not only was the United States directly involved in this contract quid pro quo profit making humanitarian aid scheme, United States citizens as contractors were also complicit in the execution of war crimes and crimes against humanity and violations of the Geneva Convention. So I resigned and I left. And shortly thereafter, I spoke to members of Congress. I took it upon myself to want to speak to members of the Foreign Affairs Committee within the U.S. Senate to make them aware of what was going on. And it kind of blew up from there. And then I ended up on Tucker Carlson and some other talk shows, other podcasts. And then in September, I guess it really blew up, went viral when myself and Captain Josephine Gilbeau, another Army veteran, were arrested in Congress on September 3rd, 2025, at the very same committee that I had been protesting to or airing my grievances with US tax dollars funding war crimes and a genocide. So I went to the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee hearing upon their return from recess in September, right at about the time we were going into a government shutdown. And I protested to Congress that we're funding a genocide and that they're violating their oath to the US Constitution. And I was arrested by the Capitol Police, and that went viral from there. So most people have probably seen me from either Tucker Carlson, Democracy Now, speaking about the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and its complicity in war crimes with the IDF, and then also my activism in Congress. I believe that we have to do more than just talk about it. We have to take action. So I'm actually here in Washington, D.C. again this week, just completed another day on the Hill talking to Congress.
Mm.
Yeah. Very, very, very good. And I also wanted to emphasize that about you in our show is that why Peter and myself, why we really respect what you're doing is not that you just observe what's going on and you complain about it, but you're actually taking action. You're getting out there, you're going to protest, you're going to Congress, you're confronting politicians. And I think this is something we can all learn from because we have been so conditioned and we've been so almost you psychologically propagandized to just have online outrage and that's it. We feel like that's the only thing we can do. But you are showing with your colleagues and other activists that you actually can take action and you have to take action. And I think that is such an important lesson for all of us. Peter, you wanted to ask a question?
Yeah, there's actually so many questions I'd like to ask, but I think I should start with something more fundamental and then get back to the present moment. And that is, I've noticed I've lived most of my adult life on kind of like the left in the U.S. And I noticed that a lot of people in that kind of ideological space tend to think of people in the U.S. armed forces as part of the enemy, and it makes perfect sense in a way in that the actions of the U.S. empire have been in many cases violations of starting with the Constitution, because any ratified treaty is the supreme law of the land according to our Constitution, and then from there violations of international law, etc. So they think, well, the soldiers then are part of the enemy. But in my own very limited experience, I went to officer candidate school for just junior half of it in the Marines, and my kind of intuitive sense was that most people who join the military don't do it because they get kicks out of killing people. Of course, there probably are some minority of people who do it for precisely that reason, but it seemed to me the majority were either their family had been a military family. It just seemed like it was the thing you do. But the majority really seemed to me like they were following Jesus's line about the greatest love is being willing to lay down your life for a neighbor. There were people who actually felt that this was service in the sense of being willing to give up their life to protect other people. And so that, I think, changes the moral picture entirely. And then you start to see the real moral crime not being committed on the part of people entering the armed forces, but rather the people commanding them and lying to them about what their actual goal is, and that is a particularly pernicious sort of crime when you can deceive somebody into committing evil acts when they themselves think that they are, doing something quite good. So, but that is based on such limited experience. I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the main motivation for most people in the armed forces, and do you think that my speculation is has some truth to it, or how would you describe the kind of psychology of the majority of people who enter the armed forces?
I think that's a very good observation. And I think for some, there's a sense of patriotism, there's altruism. For some, it's a combination of an opportunity for benefits to go to school, to receive college benefits, to have a good job, to learn skills, and also be patriotic and altruistic. Um, I I have not met in my career people that join the military simply out of a bloodlust or a rage to want to go to war and kill people. Certainly, there's an amount of those that are more aggressive in wanting to in the hawkish perspectives of war. But for the most part, Americans in the United States military, we're not in a conscription army. You voluntarily join. And when you join, regardless of whether or not you join as an enlisted soldier or an officer, you take an oath. And what's incredibly important to me, the oath that I took as an officer, which has been a guiding principle for me throughout my adult life as a military officer, being in the Army for 25 years, but also in my retirement life as a citizen, is our commitment and our obligation and our oath to the Constitution. And in the United States military, as officers who give orders and make decisions, we swear an oath only to the Constitution. When I joined the military, my oath was to swear allegiance to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I take the obligation freely. And that's it. I don't take an oath to the Army. I don't take an oath to the Congress. I don't take an oath to the president. I don't take an oath to a political party. I certainly do not take an oath to a foreign government. Take an oath to the Constitution. And to me, that's always been very important because in our country, comparison to countries that I have been to, where I have been in countries that serve under monarchs, under dictatorships, other authoritarian regimes, that our Constitution is what maintains the power of the people in a federal republic that I grew up in and that I enjoy living in, and I think makes America a unique country to what it is and the freedoms we enjoy. So that's always been my guiding light. And I think for most that join the military, there's a sense of patriotism. For those that stay, that make it a career, I think there's definitely a deep sense of service. There's certainly benefit, education, skills, a job, employment. But you really, if you're in the military only for those things, you probably wouldn't stay in very long because there is a lot of sacrifice. And I think it goes beyond just income or benefits. It's altruism and it's patriotism. And certainly that was the case for me. And I know that for anybody, different people join for different things. And I, like I said, I in my career in the soldiers that I've worked with and that I've commanded, I've never got a sense of a bloodlust desire,
And
for
how would you
war.
see that? How would you see that with if you compare that with private contractors, for example, those who went to Gaza under a private contractor? Would you say that's different?
Never in my life would I have thought or considered that I would be a mercenary contract, paramilitary contractor going into a war zone. Initially, when I took the job, I thought that I was going to be doing humanitarian work. That's how it was proposed to us. That's what the job application prescribed, so to speak. But for those that are contractors, they're it's profit. You are a mercenary. You are conducting a martial task armed with a weapon to go into another country, not on behalf of a nation, but on behalf of a company. And make money for profit, to, in some cases, bring violence, fight war, or in cases like we were with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, a for money profit company who did the bidding of the IDF to support their military operation for the forced displacement and systematic starvation of Palestinians. So for contractors, it's all about the contract. It's all about who's the client, not the Constitution, not a set of principles, the client.
Right. And I actually saw also a guy, his name is Ryan Christian, the last American vagabond, and he does a lot of research on the things that are happening behind the scenes. And he also said that all these private food posts and aid posts are just brew nests of torture, violence, and rape. Also, a lot of sexual assault. And I wanted to jump on one specific case. I think it's very important for our audience to understand. That's probably been very life changing for you as well. You in the beginning, I often heard you about that little boy that you met at one of those food posts or aid posts. I don't know how to say that in English, but there was this young boy that you met. Can you tell us a bit about that? I think this is a very important story for our audience.
Yeah, so this was a point in my life, from what I observed and what I witnessed, that really changed me in a way, that caused great reflection and great introspection. And the lens that I saw the world through in Gaza is not from someone that had not experienced war or was not exposed to violence and destruction. In the last 25 years, I have fought in every war that the United States has been engaged in, from the war on terror across the world to other conflicts in countries that most Americans don't even know we're fighting wars. Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Tajikistan, the southern Philippines, Vietnam, Cambodia, Syria, Lebanon, excuse me, not Lebanon, but Yemen, Somalia, parts of Africa, Central Asia. And the when I went into Gaza, I had been exposed to quite a bit of violent conflict, large scale war, counterterrorism, counterinsurgency, insurgency, sectarian violence. I'd seen quite a bit. And what I saw and what I witnessed in Gaza, nothing compares to it. And it was shocking. Now, in particular to this young boy named Amir, on May 28th, 2025, I was at distribution site, GHF Aid Distribution Site 3. They had 3 sites in the south in Rafah. This particular site was closest to Khan Yunis, in southern Rafah. And on that day, the large crowd had already pushed through and rushed through and was being moved off of the site. And in the end, those that usually made it to the site towards the end where there was no food left were often children, women, the disabled, the vulnerable. And as we were standing back in kind of a security line, preventing more people coming onto the site and overwatching the women and children that were on the site, finding scraps, there literally was no aid left to get. There was no food, there was no boxes. They were literally picking up scraps. And this young boy, from a distance, in his arms, he was holding what was half a bag of some rice, scraps he had picked up from the ground. Very young boy, 8 to 9 years old. And he approached us from the crowd. He approached where our security line was. And initially, I thought that this boy was probably going to ask for water or more food, or if we had more food. And as he comes walking up with these items that he had scavenged from the ground in his hands, he walked up and he reached out his hand to kiss our hand and to thank us. And he was grateful. And as I looked at this young boy, for me, I couldn't help but think of my own son. And my son is around that age, 8 years old. And I looked at this young boy and I thought to myself, this boy traveled to this site from where he came from that day, from the neighborhood that they released Palestinians to come to the site that day, was 8 to 10 kilometers away from where the site was. This young boy had no shoes, tattered clothes, obviously malnourished, dehydrated, and he walked 8, potentially 10 kilometers by himself on foot without shoes through a war zone. His father had been killed in an airstrike in Khan Yunis. He'd been separated from his family and was living in a UN encampment in Rafah. And he came to the site with a family that had taken him in, and he was separated from them because of the shooting. As the shooting occurred to the crowd and the crowd scattered, he was alone, and he really didn't know what was going on other than he came to get food. And amidst all that, he thanked us. And it really broke my heart because I looked at this young boy and I thought to myself, this child is not going to survive. This child is not going to survive this. And as he walked away alone with his mere scraps of food, barefoot, and as he was walking away, it came into my head as a voice, or maybe my subconscious, and it just spoke to me and said, don't forget this. Do not forget what you have seen here. And shortly thereafter, this young boy, along with other Palestinians on that site who were being pushed off of the site aggressively with tear gas and stun grenades and pepper spray and warning shots fired from lethal munition warning shots fired from assault rifles. And this crowd was pushing off the site. They were gunned down by Israeli gunfire from a machine gun being fired from a Merkava tank. And this young boy, along with others, were killed. And what I witnessed there in that moment was something that I couldn't tolerate it as someone that had lived a life committed to an oath. There are laws, there are Geneva Conventions, there are international humanitarian law. But to think that the most vulnerable of us, a young child without a family, simply seeking food, starving, who had to travel to get it, who, amidst his struggle, was grateful, he kissed our hand and said, thank you, and then moments later was gunned down. That's something that I couldn't let that story stay there and not be heard. That voice in my head, don't forget what you've seen here, is something that I hear every day in my head when I wake up thinking about Palestine, the Congo, Sudan, Kashmir, but especially in Gaza since I was there and I witnessed it. Do not forget what you saw here. What drives me to where I can put myself out there, my name on the line, where I can put myself out there and allow people to attack me, is that I was there. I saw it. I witnessed it. I saw it with my own eyes, heard it with my own ears, touched it with my own hands, smelled it with my own nose. I was there. And nothing will convince me otherwise of what I saw or change my mind, nor will I retreat from, do not forget what you saw here. And I think the world needs to be aware of it.
And why do you think it is that there haven't been other people from the GHF coming forward? Is it a difference between the type of person that selects into a mercenary company versus the armed forces, or is it a matter of economic necessity where they feel like they're going to be out on the street? Is it just the kind of group psychology of don't want to rock the boat, or it seems like nobody else is speaking out, so I'm not going to speak out? What do you think accounts for that?
All of those factors layered, for some influences more than others in terms of what that layer is. But think about it this way, that so I was not the first to resign. There were others that resigned before me. So when we first started operations on the 26th of May, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation director on the 26th of May, Jake Wood, stepped down as the director of the GHF, citing that the operation would not be conducted in accordance with humanitarian principles. The very next day after our first day of distribution, the second in charge of the entire contract resigned. After him, others resigned. I was not the first and I was not the last. Others before me did go to the media, but they did it anonymously. The reason for that anonymity is that of the threats that come, the death threats, the attacking of your character, the attacking your family, the personal attacks, that's a hard pill to swallow when the majority of the world hasn't seen what you've seen and has no idea what you've seen, and you're trying to explain that to what you've seen to people that may or may not understand, number one, but two, for a world that for the large part up until recently doesn't care. So why put yourself at risk? Why put yourself out there and disrupt a comfortable life or your reputation or everything you've worked for to be threatened and smeared for a situation that most people don't care about? And I don't say that to be crass. I say that because it's true. If the world cared, we wouldn't be where we are right now with this situation, with a genocide unfolding before our very eyes on 4K HD definition on the internet. So another reason why many that I worked with have not come forward is out of ideological belief. The majority of the contractors that were hired to work on the armed security contract, the majority of them were recruited directly from the United States Infidels Motorcycle Club. The Infidels Motorcycle Club is a motorcycle club, a gang, if you will, that fashioned themselves as modern day crusaders. They brandish themselves with giant crusader cross tattoos that say infidels on them, with 1095 written in the tattoo, which is the year that Pope Urban gave the directive to start the first crusades, to go to the Holy Land and rid the earth of the vermin Muslims. His words, not mine. So you have this organization of the Infidels Motorcycle Club who were hired to work on this security contract, who have a creed of fight global jihad and eliminate Muslims from the earth. And here you are in the Holy Land. They saw it as a crusade. They saw it as a calling, a pilgrimage. They were happy to be there. What better calling, or what better way to answer their self-fulfilled calling as these infidels, these crusaders, than to go to the Holy Land and take part in killing Arab Muslims? So for some, it was ideological. For some, it's just fear and it's just not worth the effort. And for others, it's because of the money. $2,000 a day US. When you take into account that all your food is paid for, you're given a per diem, you're staying in a fancy 3 to 4 star hotel paid for by the company, plus your pay on top of that, you're making about $2,000 a day. That's a lot of money. $60,000 a month. If you went over there for the initial contract term, half a year, or even stayed and went on it for a year, you're coming home with close to $1 million. That is very lucrative. It's a lot of money to do nothing but stay silent. The job itself was not that hard. Arm yourself with a fully automatic machine gun, a pistol, tear gas, stun grenades, a riot baton, pepper spray, body armor, driving in an armored truck that can stop rocket-propelled grenades and anything else that can be thrown at it. Drive into Gaza, observe thousands of starving Palestinians fight for survival, for food, and then leave and get paid $2,000 a day. It wasn't hard work. What they paid us for was for our complicity and our silence.
And not just that, I would say that these people literally enjoy torturing and abusing the Palestinians.
It was clear to me that quite a number of them did.
Yeah, it's just terrible when you think about that. I often focus on more of, also on our Substack, on more of the individual stories, which we often forget in these large numbers. So that's why I found that story that you talked about the boy Amir. That's why I found it so incredibly important. That's just one young boy among what is probably now approaching 1 million dead people in Palestine, and
Yes.
and according to some estimates, almost 500,000 women and children. That is 500,000 or almost 1 million individual stories like the story you told, and people often forget that. Also, the fact that the serious systemic sexual abuse of women and girls and men, by the way, that also often gets almost no attention. And if you send these types for $2,000 a day over there to do whatever the hell they want to a people that is completely left behind by the world, man, I just shiver at the thought of what's going on there, man. And yeah, I don't know. It's
it gave me a glimpse into side of humanity that I didn't know existed. It's something that I certainly could not live with nor tolerate as a human being. My values as an American, as a father, as a husband, as a family man, couldn't I couldn't live with it. Some people not only live with it, they're okay with it because of an ideological sense. But when you think about how Palestinians are perceived in the eyes of the Israelis, and quite frankly, to be honest, in the eyes of most of the world, subhuman. They don't have value. That's how the Israelis treat them. When you think about sexual violence and you think about the way that the society is treated, long before October 7th, 2023, long before 2026, long before 2000 or 1990, going all the way back to the 1800s, when you look at the Palestinians and how they've been dehumanized. They don't have a land. They don't exist. Palestinians aren't a real thing. The narrative that we hear coming out of the Israeli government, and quite frankly, some of those in our government, that is dehumanization at the base level, that human beings, their value is stripped from them to where killing them becomes commonplace. It becomes okay. It becomes acceptable. In Israel, there are two locations I want to describe. One is a small hamlet, or a kibbutz, as it would be called in Israel. It's called Sterdot. And this, you can find this online. There's been documentaries about it. BBC, who did an interview with me, also did a documentary. I've been to this location. It's located in Israel, about 2.5 kilometers east of Gaza, east of that border of the fence. And it's a large hilltop with a panoramic scenic view of Gaza. And if you stand on this hill, you can see all of Gaza out to the Mediterranean. And on this hill, the Israeli government has built a picnic area. They've put in vending machines. They put in picnic tables. They put in the large binoculars that you would see like on top of the Empire State Building, where you can look at the cityscape. And you can go there and watch Gaza being bombed and have lunch and a picnic as you watch Gaza being bombed. And it's celebrated. People go there and take selfies and celebrate what is happening to them, for the majority, unarmed women and children. Another location that I saw while I was there, that it just gave me great pause for humanity, in that there's a sports bar located just north of Gaza in the southern portion of Ashkelon. So the major cities along the coastline, you have Tel Aviv. Further south, you have Ashdod. And then a little bit further south, you have Ashkelon, which is very close to the border with Gaza. In Ashkelon, at a sports club, at a beach resort, in this sports club, much like you would see in a sports club where you can watch a football game or cricket or baseball or sports or whatever, in this sports bar, they have live feed of cameras from the IDF towers inside of Gaza, where you can watch, like you're watching sport, Palestinians being killed, Palestinians starving, Palestinians digging through rubble to find food, Palestinians lapping up water out of a puddle to have water to drink. And you can watch it while you're sitting in this sports bar as if it were entertainment. And people go there and partake in this. It's inhumane. It is a side of humanity that I didn't know existed. That is why this persists, is because the Palestinians for decades have been dehumanized. And what's sad is that that's also on us as a world.
Yeah. I wanted to go back a little bit to that questions about the people in the U.S. military. I saw this interview that Tucker Carlson did with a former Pentagon official. I forgot his name, but he was saying something along the lines of, he was trying to explain why it seemed that the Israeli government was engaging in all of these wars, killing people, and not just in Gaza, West Bank, but many surrounding countries. why it seemed like the neocons in the U.S. were so bloodthirsty at the moment. And his interviewee said something like, "Well, look, Tucker, if you go into the Pentagon today, the people who are younger than us make us." Tucker and himself, who are kind of considered to be, isolationist would be the sort of pejorative version, or restrainer would be, I guess, the better term. He said, people in the Pentagon now, the officers younger than us, make us look like Attila the Hun. And so his explanation was that these older neocons, they think that this is really their last chance to achieve their dreams of complete domination of West Asia. And because they can see the writing on the wall, you can look at public opinion polling. Anyone under 50 versus people over 50, there's an enormous gap in opinion. There's a chasm in opinions just in that age, these two age groups. And then if that's also the case in the U.S. military, then that was his answer to the question, that they can see that the next generation of officers are not going to go anywhere near the kind of policies that the neocons want. Now, when I heard that, that's something I very much wanted to believe. So I initially have some skepticism. Maybe I find that too convincing because it's something I want to believe already. But since you have more experience with people in the military, is there truth to that? What do you see as the best way to describe the kind of dominant ideology among officers in the military and maybe enlisted people as well? How would you describe it?
So I would agree with you that the next generation of up and coming officers are going to be less hawkish or have this this war mentality of war. I certainly hope that the next generation of politicians and the next generation of voters feels the same. Why I think that we see that difference is that we have seen this generation grew up after 9/11, weren't even alive when the towers went down, who don't have the context of that, who see no purpose in endless wars of colonialism, of neo-imperialism is what I would call it, and what we've seen in the Middle East and the wars that we fight. For example, we are still in Iraq. To this day, we still have named operations in Iraq with U.S. soldiers stationed throughout Iraq. We have U.S. soldiers still in northern or northeast Syria. We have soldiers deployed throughout the Middle East. Up until 2021, we still had a very large presence in Afghanistan. And when you look at these wars and how they just don't end, that is not what the next generation wants to endure and live through. And I don't blame them, because no one wins. No one wins when you use war as your answer to every situation. I firmly believe in the power of nations through what every nation brings onto the world stage. It's an acronym, DIME: diplomacy, information, your military, and your economy. The M should never be the lead. You have levers, diplomacy and information. You can at times use the economy as leverage. The use of the military in war is always as the last resort. It is when negotiations fail and nothing else can achieve an end state but war. And it should be limited, and it should be focused, and it should have a clear end state. The wars we fought over the last 2 decades plus have neither had a political end state, a clear objective, or a culmination point in ending other than just failure. The next generation doesn't want to live that life. I don't want the next generation to live that life. When I retired in March, I was very happy with being retired. I wasn't contracting. I wasn't looking for a second career. I wasn't doing consulting work. I was doing part-time work at Lowe's in lawn and garden, being a father, enjoying retired life. The reason I felt now that I have to step up to do this is because I want, one, to empower the next generation, to let them know that they have people that still care, that will fight for what's right. I don't want our children, my children, your children, my grandchildren, to inherit a world on the road that we're going down. And the next generation doesn't want that either. What have the endless wars gotten us? They've made the rich richer, they've made the poor poorer, and they've created a world of veterans who I think for the next 20 to 30 years, the United States will have issues with trying to cope with the number of veterans that these wars have produced
Yeah,
in
and I think
terms
that
of in terms of disabilities and debilitating conditions.
yeah, I mean the statistics on veteran suicide are pretty eye opening. I think there's been
Yes.
more veterans who've killed themselves than have been actually killed in the wars themselves. And I remember listening to an interview with Matt Ho. He might have been actually testifying before Congress at a committee. I forget, but he basically said that the DoD has done lots of studies of the mental health crisis among veterans, and they consistently find that the number one reason for soldier suicide is shame and guilt. And that, I think, is just the unavoidable consequence of having civilian leadership that views the military as just a pawn. It's like they're playing Risk with real people's lives. A lot of them are people who have never been in the military themselves, and some of them, like Lindsey Graham, is a good example, seem to be trying to compensate for a perceived lack of manliness or something by being such hawkish warmongers. I really hope that. At any rate, it seems like there's a great potential among veterans in the U.S. because, in my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like again most of them enter the armed forces for altruistic reasons, for moral reasons, and then later on, if they come to read about U.S. foreign policy history, I could imagine thousands and thousands, maybe hopefully more, tens, hundreds of thousands becoming new Smedley Butlers. I don't know if you guys know. Yeah, I thought maybe only the Marines know him, but for those who don't know, he was a Marine Corps Major General who fought in a lot of the Banana Wars. He was sent to China as well, and then he later on in life realized that everything he had been told about the supposed wonderful moral reasons for being sent to these various places were in fact lies, and the real reason was just securing U.S. commercial interests. So he went on a whole speaking tour saying that in his military career he was used as a gangster for capitalism, a muscle man for Chase Manhattan, a thug for United Fruit Company, etc. Do you see anything similar, like a potential source of hope among veterans who kind of awaken to the reality of U.S. foreign policy, become angry and active, and then make a major political change?
I do think so, and I think that when you look at this generation that has been in the military, I would say my generation that came in at the height of at the beginning of the height of and throughout the duration of both wars. We've come to learn, because we've seen it, that we have been fighting wars and we've been fighting conflict for the military industrial complex, not to protect the American people, not to protect democracy, not for apple pie and the American flag. We've been lied to. In Iraq, we were lied to. In Afghanistan, we were lied to. Fighting in Northeast Syria and our incursion deeper into Northeast Syria after ISIS was pushed out of Iraq, we were lied to. The reasons that we will potentially have to take military intervention to take Greenland, because if we don't, China or Russia will. Lies. The reason we had military intervention into Venezuela for drugs that don't even come from Venezuela, weapons of mass destruction of which fentanyl is now labeled, doesn't even come from Venezuela. It's about oil. It's about industry. It's about the rich getting richer, and the military and industrial complex has become so ingrained. And Eisenhower warned us of this. Eisenhower, as the Supreme Allied Commander and leaving Europe after World War II, also served as the president, warned us of the military industrial complex. And I think a lot of veterans that have served are seeing it firsthand that, on our backs, on our blood, on our sacrifice, the rich who didn't serve, who didn't sacrifice, who didn't put their skin in the game, who didn't lose loved ones and family members and miss Christmases and weddings and family events. And I think in the 25 years I served in the military, I haven't been home for a single Christmas until this year. This year was the first time I actually had a Christmas at home, uninterrupted. And you sacrifice. And then when you look why we've done it, it makes you angry. More so, it doesn't make you angry. It makes you very introspective and reflecting on what you've done. And unfortunately, for many of us veterans, the number varies, but the average we would say is 22 military a day are taking their lives to suicide, because it's hard to grasp in terms of what you've sacrificed your life for, what you've seen. Killing is not natural. Fighting a war is not natural. I firmly believe that fighting war is the lowest form of human existence. Basically, what we say as nations is that I don't agree with you, and we can't find a solution, and we can't come to an agreement, so we're going to kill each other. That is what war is at its most basic sense. We wouldn't raise our children to act that way, but we do on a global scale. And the reason we do it is not necessarily because our enemies are our enemies. I think the world would be a much better place if the United States and China and Russia and India and Pakistan had international cooperation in technology. Maybe we could save the planet instead of destroying it every day. We'd be in a much better place than fighting endless war. And when you see who the endless war profits, it's the military industrial complex. It's not me. It's not you. It's not the soldiers that have served in these wars. It's the elite. And we're seeing it more so than ever now on full display in the US administration, I believe.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I would say I would even go a step further. I would say, indeed, I would agree with you that war is one of the lowest forms of human existence. And I would even say that I think most wars are just the powerful grabbing stuff from other people who are weak and don't have any power. And that also explains why, for example, such a good and kind people like the Palestinians are the ones who suffer the most and are dehumanized the most. If you think about it, if you just contrast these two groups right now, Zionists versus Palestinians. And I'm not going to say Jews. I'm not going to equate Jews with Zionists. So I keep repeating that because we often get these comments. Why don't you say that? No, I'm not going to say that. So if you contrast these two groups of people, it's just such a contrast when it comes to just the kind-heartedness, warmth, etc., etc. And it's the ones who are the weakest, the kindest, the warmest, who are dehumanized the most. And it's just so painful to see. And you said something very good. You said something about 9/11, and I wanted to jump in on that. So Peter and myself, we are born in the 80s. So we really, you could say, grew up with the whole 9/11 thing, and we were young in those days, and we really experienced the transition from a world where you fell for that crap to a world where we are starting to see through the cracks, starting to see through the bullshit. And when I remember those days, and it was so the 9/11 days and the war on terror stuff were such dark days. People forget that because we're now already living in a very dark time. But people often forget how incredibly dark and horrible those days were under Bush and the war on terror, and it was really, really terrible stuff. And even myself, I, as somebody who is a mixed kid from the Netherlands, with a father from Algeria, mother is Dutch, so I'm in between both worlds, you could say. Even I fell for the nonsense a bit, the propaganda in those days, like, oh, they're attacking because they're so against Western freedoms and that kind of stuff. I was young, and I was very impressionable, but that multi-ethnic influence that I have actually made me investigate what's going on here. And I quite early on started to understand, started to find out about imperialism and what's going on and why is the US in Iraq. So I started to really see through the bullshit. But I was in a minority in those days. I was with my fellow students. We had you could say a club of leftist oriented students, so we were already very aware of imperialism and that kind of stuff. But it was not done in those days. It was, oh, no, you were seen as like, oh, you're defending the bad guys and that kind of stuff. And but today you see a really big shift among people. The discussion of imperialism, the discussion of wars for profit, it has become very normal. And I would say that one of the reasons for that is social media. I think there's just, it's so difficult to just literally control everything. They're trying it. They're buying everything up. The Zionists. They're buying literally every social media and media corporation to stifle our discussions. But it's not there yet. Long story short, Anthony, what? How was that transition in your mind? When did that happen? Was that in Palestine, or maybe even earlier or later? Because I would say if you're somebody who went into the army, you're also somebody who thought, okay, I'm going to help doing aid work in Palestine. I would think that you also still had a bit of an idealistic image in those days, and I can also see your transition. You have transitioned to somebody who is becoming strongly in the anti-imperialist camp. Where did that happen? How did that happen? Do you have any sense of like, okay, this is the moment that I started seeing like, hey, this is not right. What's going on here? Sorry, you're muted. Yeah.
So I'll paint that picture for you and provide the most clear answer that I can to a very deep question. It's a great question. So, I joined the military at 17. My prefrontal cortex hadn't even fully developed yet. Like a young man, 17, not even old enough to vote. And I grew up in a military family. My mother served in the Air Force. My father served in the Navy. I remember when my uncle deployed to Desert Storm and the letters home and the yellow ribbons on the door. And you think of that and you're like, that seems noble. Now, the generation growing up through Vietnam would tell the next generation, don't go to war, don't fight in war. The generation of which I grew up in, of my parents' generation, or my kind of the that generation in between my parents and me, more of that generation that fought in the Gulf War and Desert Storm, we were fighting wars or conflicts that were very quick. Grenada, Panama. The war in Desert Shield, Desert Storm lasted 90 hours. We pushed Saddam out of Kuwait, ended it. So we saw these quick wars that had quick endings. And 9/11 really did change things. And I saw the towers fall on 9/11. I was in New York. I witnessed it. It made me angry. Of course, I believed everything that I was told, that the big, bad, evil Al Qaeda and the terrorists hiding out in the mountains of Afghanistan, and or we have to go to Iraq for weapons of mass destruction, because if we don't, they'll use them against us. And I kind of thought in those days, when Saddam was brought to trial and he was like, we never have any weapons of mass destruction. Like, what is wrong with you people? Like, you invaded our country and you destroyed our country over something that wasn't even true. And in looking at that now, you're like, yeah, that's kind of true. So, or not kind of true, it is true. And so I guess where it hit me is that when I retired, I was reflecting on quite a bit, because my last combat deployment had been to Syria. And while I was in Syria, on the 18th of December of 2018, Donald Trump, in his first presidency, tweeted out a message. We're leaving Syria. No more wars. I was in Syria. I found out that we were leaving Syria through a tweet that the president put out. And we jumped through hoops to make a plan to leave Syria responsibly. And we proposed that plan, and it came down to nothing but money. Money, money, money. And as soon as the administration switched out, we're right back into Syria again. And that caused me great pause and reflection. Towards the end of my career, I was the battalion commander that oversaw the staff that went in to operate or to conduct Operation Allies Refuge, which was the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Years fought in Afghanistan, and when we left, when the United States left Afghanistan, when that last C-17 Reach 118 flew out of Hamid Karzai International Airport, the entity that we had to negotiate with to beg to allow us to leave without being shot out of the sky or attacked by ISIS Khorasan, who had also taken over the northern part of the city, we had to negotiate and beg the Taliban to protect us on our way out. The organization that we fought for 2 decades plus, we negotiated with to negotiate our departure. And I look at that and I think, this is not okay. This is not right. The lives lost, the money spent, the billions and destabilization of the world. For what? For the military industrial complex. Gaza solidified that in my mind to where I saw behind the curtain. All of my experiences before were making these assessments from stage front of the curtain. When I went into Gaza, I got a peek behind that curtain, not in the military, where I could think a little more freely and speak more freely and assess those things and think, this isn't right. And when I witnessed the United States of America beholden to, told what to do by, and controlled by a foreign government, the government I'm talking about is Israel, but let's say I don't even name the government, just a foreign government, period. And looking behind the curtain of who's pulling the strings and why we have fought the wars that we have fought, and why we are fighting the wars that we are fighting, and why we will most likely fight the wars that we are going to soon fight. Behind the curtain, and it comes down to the isms, whether it's Zionism, whether it's nationalism, whether it's capitalism. Zionism is not synonymous with world Jewry or Judaism. It is not. Zionism is not equal to Israeli. Zionism is a nationalistic, political, racist view of the world, comparable to Nazism of the 1940s. What is Nazi? Nazi is just short lingo for Nationalist, the nationalist party. That was Hitler's party. What did they use to embolden themselves to the people? Religion. They called themselves the Third Reich. The First Reich was the Roman Empire. The Second Reich was the Holy Roman Empire under Charlemagne. Hitler had this vision of recreating German Lebensraum, or the living space, in central Germany, entitled to them by God through the Holy Roman Empire to reclaim Charlemagne's lands in the Third Reich. And he used nationalism, nationalist, Nazi, to make that happen. The Zionists do the same thing. They rob Judaism as a religion and make it synonymous with Zionism. And it's not. You can be anti-Zionist. It doesn't make you an anti-Semite. It doesn't make you anti-Israel. It doesn't make you anti-Jew. Quite the opposite. So when I saw behind the curtain of what that really was, it brought a lot of things into perspective. What solidified it for me to where I was like, okay, I have a different view of the world now, is when I came back from Gaza and I went to Congress. And I spoke with members of Congress in their offices, most of them principals, the actual senator or the actual congressman or woman. And when I told them about what I saw in Gaza, the genocide, dead children, fathers carrying their dead and starving children in their arms, begging for a place to bury them, because if you dig a hole in Gaza, you will get shot with a drone. Families torn apart, children dead and dying, listening to the sounds of crying people crying out from the rubble, because when an apartment complex was dropped by a US munition, they didn't get out. And they're buried in that rubble, and no one's coming to get them. And for days and days and days, as you drive through Rafah, you hear the sounds and the voices get more faint and faint and faint until they're dead. When you see that and you explain that to a US congressman, that the United States bombs and tax dollars is going into that, and this was their response. It wasn't, oh my God, what do we do? Their response was, we know. We know. The we know came in three different forms. We know, and we're trying to do something about it. We know, and it's complicated, and we don't know what to do. And then you had in the camp of, we know, and that's what we want. That, for me, broke the paradigm of fighting wars for patriotism, fight them there so we don't fight them here, red, white, and blue, apple pie and freedom. It's not. It's colonialism. It's imperialism. It's the military industrial complex that makes the elite rich and the rich richer, and all of us suffer, not just here in America, around the world. When I was in Gaza on the 26th of May, 34,000 starving Palestinians on foot rushed to distribution site number 1. As I stood there on that afternoon, there were so many human beings moving at one time that the ground shook. I looked at the crowd coming towards us and I told myself, Tony, this is it. This is where it ends. And when this crowd of 34,000 people swarmed onto the site searching for food, desperately holding on to survival, I wasn't kidnapped. I wasn't beaten. I wasn't killed. Wasn't stabbed, hit, pushed. I was thanked. I was hugged, kissed on the cheek, begging for food. Those are the Palestinians I met. Those are the Iraqis I met. Those are the Afghans I met. Those are the Syrians I've met. Those are the Filipinos in Mindanao that I met. So when these congressmen and these war hawks want to talk to me or any of those that have seen it, what war is and who's the enemy that we're fighting, I will tell you, they are wrong.
Well, Anthony, that's very powerful. We've already taken you over the hour, but I have one last thing to ask you, and I hope your family isn't listening because they might hate me for suggesting this. But I really hope that you run for office to try to clean this situation out, because God knows we need it. And I think someone like yourself would be an excellent candidate. I really hope that happens. But regardless, thank you for all you've done so far, and also, of course, for being so generous with your time today.
Yes. You're muted again, Anthony, for the echo.
No, I enjoy the conversation. I could talk about this for a long time. It's incredibly important to me. And when I walk the halls of Congress and I see congressmen both in the Senate and the House, I think to myself, how did they get to this point? How does a congressman take $891,000 from a foreign lobbyist group and then turn on their own values for money? I don't think they went into Congress for that. Something changed them. And what I think
AOC,
changes people in Congress, it's money, it's power, something that I have that Donald Trump, Pete Hegseth, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, something that I have that they don't is enough. I have enough. Family, everything I need in life. That's the difference between Americans that struggle every day and our current state of politicians. It's never enough. $1 billion, not enough. $1 trillion, not enough. All of the global south, not enough. Greenland, not enough. All of the Middle East, not enough. It's never enough, and it never will be. And for those of us that have enough, we've also had enough.
Well said, Anthony. Very well said. And I think we can. We are definitely gonna invite you again. There's so much more we would love to talk to you about. This was an excellent, excellent conversation. And I also wanted to say something about Hitler. And Nazi is actually is even worse. Nazi stands for Nationalsozialismus, which literally means national socialism, where they actually combine nationalism with the kind of more humanitarian socialism. Some Oh, sorry, I thought I was muted. Something that is very comparable to what you see today, is that where nationalism is combined with freedom and democracy. You know what I mean? So that it seems that it's so old already to rile up people for that combination between nationalism and then some kind of humanitarian component attached to it. So people die for that, whether it's democracy or socialism or whatever. But yeah. Anyway, I think this was great. I hope you are willing to come again, Anthony. We can go on do some more conversation. Great, and up to next time. And thank you for all your hard work and activism. And we keep following you.
I just want to say thank you both for your platform and your voice. I'm a fan. It was serendipity that I had recently subscribed to your channel and been watching a few episodes, and then Peter at Revolutionary Change reached out to me, and I was like, is he reading my mind? I was like, Peter, are you watching my algorithm? So I'm very happy that I had the opportunity to speak with you both, and I think it's important for everyone in the world, not just here in the United States, but to my fellow Americans and to those in the world, stay informed. Don't take what is fed to you by the machine. Believe what you see with your eyes, believe what you hear with your ears, and don't simply take things because it's fed to you. Look at what's happening and ask yourself, what is this in front of you? I think the generation that's coming up, because the exposure to social media and the breaking away of legacy media. My son never watches TV. Like, we used to watch, TGIF, and you watch Full House and The Simpsons on a Friday. My son has never watched normal TV. Everything is this social media or social networks. That is why this generation is so much more, the next generation coming is so much more informed, because they're not fed the firewall of legacy media garbage.
Peter, you're muted. No, sorry, Peter, you're muted in the system. You need to unmute yourself in the system.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, thank you so much. That was a fantastic talk, and run for Congress, please. At any rate, hope to talk to you again, maybe as Senator Aguilar, but hopefully before then as well.
Static crackles, voices rise. Truth breaks through their velvet lies. A screen of fire, a shield of steel. Bedbeat medium makes you feel. No borders, no change. No silence,